We had a sergeant from Puerto Rico named Maldonado. He was slim, short and slim. He wore his helmet down past his eyebrows, and he had a tiny mustache. He was an NCO, a non-commissioned officer, which means he wasn't drafted. A lot of the NCOs were veterans of the Korean War and sometimes World War II. They were career soldiers. The NCOs weren't the only thing that were handed down. After World War II, the defense budget dropped off. In Korea, they just used the leftover weapons, and my gun was handed down after that. Half the time during training, Maldonado had to stand next to me and hold the lever while I pulled on the trigger and made sure the barrel didn't kick back. Today, you hear these stories about Army negligence, Walter Reed, and so forth. I believe them all because of what I saw. If you can imagine what it was like when there wasn't a war being financed, the upkeep of equipment was almost non-existent. It was a shambles. Sergeant Maldonado would say to us over and over, "You ain't going nowhere tonight. You clean your rifle and your bayonet." So guess what we did? At 3 a.m., we'd be laying on the bunks, and all of a sudden, a guy'd break out in the imitation. And then we'd all try to do the imitation around the barracks. "You ain't going nowhere tonight. You clean your rifle and your bayonet." And of course, there was cursing, including, "You fucking guys gotta get across that field. I don't care if you shit, piss, do what you gotta do, but get across that field." We had only 5 hours to sleep, but here we'd be up at night trying to perfect the caricature. "You fucking guys go nowhere tonight. You clean your rifle and your bayonet." Where were we gonna go? We were out there in the middle of the sand in Fort Dix. I was drafted soon after they integrated the Army in terms of race. In my barracks, there were a number of draftees from the South, both black and white. I recall that everyone dealt with this by being very, very polite. Meanwhile, you could cut the tension with a knife. They had me guarding a PX warehouse where all the food was stored. It was a PX with a basement. My partner was a red-headed redneck, and we rode around in a Jeep. The Jeeps were still tiny, and the MR rifles left over from World War II were very big. I was the rifleman, and he was the driver, because they couldn't fit 2 rifles in this little Jeep. I guess I got to be the rifleman because I never learned how to drive. I don't remember his name. He had to let me out to guard this warehouse in the pitch black in the middle of Fort Dix with nothing else around it, and my rifle didn't work. So if I shot off, I had to pull the lever. It wouldn't pop up automatically. So he lets me off, and I've got 7 cartridges in my rifle, which is nothing today, and an extra 7 in my pocket, and a clip. It had a magazine that you had to push it in at the bottom. If you had a little sand in there, it wouldn't go in. And I'm all alone, out in the middle of the sand and the woods with this broken rifle. One thing they told us when we first hit Dix was, "Wild dogs." Because Dix is about 100 miles square of uncivilized land, there are wild dogs that are dangerous. And I'm standing there with a gun, and I see 2 eyes pop up the distance of 4 or 5 blocks into the woods, then 2 more eyes, then 2 more, and it's a pack. And I've got only 7 shots. So if there's 7 dogs, I've only got 1 per, and I've got to reach in and load. God only knows what will happen. Well, it was a happy ending because the dogs got bored and I got a stiff arm. But they went away. Another time, after standing there for half the night, a man came out of the basement of the PX, a middle-aged man. "Who's there?" I asked him to identify himself. He told me he was a plumber, sent to fix some pipes. He showed me some kind of ID card, said he was a civilian from the area, called in special. I had no idea how to tell if he was lying or tell the truth, so I let him go. 5 o'clock in the morning, and they say plumbers are never there when you need them. I was stationed briefly in Staten Island. At night, we would sign off over the radio with the phonetic alphabet. and we'd play a prank on the listener. Foxtrot, uniform, Charlie, Kilo, Yankee, Oscar, uniform. F-U-C-K-Y-O-U. The guy on the other end would write it down until he caught on, and then he would start cursing back at us. Then there were the Ed Sullivan bits we'd do. Ed Sullivan had become the Toastmaster for vaudeville before he'd moved up to a TV show host. He had a very unusual way of speaking. At 2 a.m. on the airwaves, we'd practice our imitation of the Ed Sullivan Show. I've got a really big show for you tonight. We'd do this in the middle of the night, never got caught. Wrightstown was a spot near Fort Dix that existed solely as a watering hole for the Army. It was a town absolutely crowded with bars that made a living selling liquor to the troops. There was a song at the fort. AWOL, AWOL, where you been? Down in Wrightstown, drinking gin. Wrightstown was like a drop-in center for soldiers who liked whiskey. It all seems like a bad dream, as W.C. Fields would say.